Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Zack Onisko with us. Zack, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I should say for coming on again. You're one
Yeah,
of the repeat guests. Is this number two or three? I can't remember.
this is two, I believe. Yeah,
Two, okay. I know we've talked in between episodes, about different
yeah,
stuff, so it seems like we've had more contact than that. So Zack, you're such a great guest to have on the show because you've done things in growth leadership at multiple well-known companies, and so
yeah,
you were at Creative Market. I think the last time we had you on the show,
yeah,
and you were heading up a lot of their growth initiatives. Then you went over to Hire.com. You did
yeah,
a lot of stuff with their growth team, and now you're actually at Dribbble,
yeah,
working with them. And so you have a lot of perspective, a lot of insights from a lot of different companies. So let's just dive in.
sure.
Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah,
All right. So let's start with Hired, right? So
yeah,
that's the kind of the most recent, longest stint you had. So
yeah,
tell me, it Hired. It seems like you guys had a lot of data to work with, right? Because
yeah.
it's a lot of users, a lot of information flowing through the system. How did you view all that data from a growth perspective?
Well, there's kind of data in kind of two senses. One is that we have like internal data, and one thing that I got pretty excited about, um, for about a year there was looking at external data, looking at third party data sources,
Hmm.
um, for us to be able to understand our market much better. So kind of back up about Hired. So Hired started as developer auction. So our MVP was a marketplace that matched Ruby on Rails developers with YC companies. As we've evolved, we've moved into new categories. We placed designers and product managers and data scientists and things like that. Uh, we leverage internally in this kind of our curation and matching algorithms that our data science team have built. We leverage our past data to
Hmm.
be able to make predictive analysis on whether or not a candidate is going to be right for our platform. What's the likelihood they're going to get an interview request?
So, like,
Um,
based on how other people with these same data points, performed, this person will or won't perform also, probably.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
So that's kind of the first kind of adventure into
Hmm.
our, the data realm was making building out a data science team and making some huge investments in algorithms to really to pull away a lot of our manual process. We have a human curation team, and where we got to was that the algorithmic curation was taking like about 50% of our candidates, so that took off a lot of that bulk off of
Gotcha.
our team.
Did the
um,
quality get better or stay the same? Like, what happened when we went from a human to an algorithm making these analysis?
Well, the algorithm was really great at the rejection side. So they could see patterns and people who just didn't. I mean, we had people who would sign up who were like plumbers, right? And we just don't have a market for
It's
plumbers.
easy to say no using an algorithm.
Right. So
Yeah.
so that helped us out a lot there and just took a lot of that volume away, especially as we've scaled and that number of applicants have just shot through the roof.
Hmm.
Um, but that historic data was very much based because we came from developer auction based on developer personas, and so we had algorithms that worked for developer roles, but we didn't have the data for like new roles we want to move into like
Hmm.
design, product management, and so we started to look at third party data. This kind of global publicly available data to help us look outside of our walls of past data and look at like just all the data that's available, and we'd use that to modify our data science algorithms.
Okay, so give
We
me some
also use
examples of like what those third-party data sources are. Are we talking Google Trends? Are we talking, information you bought off a third party? Like, what is that?
yeah, so there's a bunch of on the sales side of things. There's a ton of these kind of lead gen tools, and there's data products like Clearbit
Hmm.
or Zoom Info, or there's a bunch, right?
I gotcha.
You can Google and find a bunch. So we use some folks like that. We use like so kind of three entities: so people, jobs, and companies.
Hmm.
So we partnered with Mattermark to bring in a bunch of company data, and then the jobs we used another company too, who was going out and finding all the jobs that were being posted all over the world. And that was a great signal for us to understand like true supply, supply and demand in any given market. So,
Yeah.
as Hired was, expanding our categories and the different roles that we supported, we're also expanding our geographic reach. And so we're, setting up new offices in cities all around the world, like in 17 cities.
So you would use this data to decide, should we set up an office in this market? Should we get into this vertical of, this skill set? So you're using all the data really to dictate the, the roadmap of the business.
Right. So kind of in twofold. One is that we can, we can look at the data to with confidence, open up shop in a new market.
Mm-hmm.
We can also use that data to be able to infer who the hiring manager is at a particular company, who we know was hiring for a role.
So it's actually a lead.
So it's a lead, right? And
Yeah.
so we can build these kind of like automated lead lists, and our sales team is just, open up their computer and they just have this list and they just, pick up the phone and just, fire away.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
Kind of those two things combined are pretty huge. And we also use data, in more traditional growth aspect of pulling friction away from our onboarding flow. So you can imagine like a product like Hired, which is, we're asking people basically to, give us their resume information, which, no one likes filling out their resume. And so, when I came on, I think the onboarding flow was like 9 steps. So it's just very, kind of laborious, right, to even apply for Hired. And so with third-party data, there's a, like I said, like Talent IQ, there's Clearbit, there's a bunch of these you can plug in their API, and with a unique identifier like a name and email address, you can ping one of these APIs, and then we can pull back all this like publicly available professional data. Basically, not have to expose
fill it
all
in
the
manually
fields and ask people to do it manually.
Yeah.
So we do stuff like that. Like if we can find enough data to basically to curate a person, we wouldn't have to ask. We could skip steps for a user. So that was pretty cool. We made some pretty significant gains in our conversion rate for that funnel.
Let me ask you about this. You hear the discussion a lot about, should we be data driven or data informed? And data driven is sort of, the numbers are king. If they say it, we do it. We don't ask a lot of questions. Data informed is, we like using data, but we still have a brain inside of our skull that has its own intuitions and knowledge that may differ, from the data. Where do you sit on that? Because it seems like you use data more than most at a very deep level. With the stuff you just talked about, you're using it to generate new leads and sales. You're using it to make the onboarding easier. You're using it to know what market to get into. If anyone can make a case for data driven, it might be you. But where do you actually stand on it?
So, I think that there's at this point in my career, I've kind of been around the block, and so I've seen and done a lot of things. And so there's, I think that I know better with a lot of things. It's just not, there's an old adage when you talk to growth guys, they're like, well, 8 out of 10 of my experiments failed. And like, well, at this point, I just don't have that much time in my day. I'm like, I want to make sure that if I'm going to, invest my time, that we're going to, make an impact. And so, so I'm really looking for like bigger plays. And so that data informed is definitely, there's one is that there's all kinds of data. And then 2 is that there's all these different ways that you can leverage that data for different things. Right. And so, so I try to look at, data is really a signal for what's going on.
Yeah.
And there's like the macro data, which is like, when you have thousands of users doing a thing, and then there's like micro signals of just like talking to your customers. That's a data point too. So
an anecdote can be data.
Sure. Right. Yeah. And then your experience, like if you've been doing this stuff for a long time, like those are data points that you bring to the table of like,
I like that.
If you've trialed a bunch of stuff, or if you just know a market really well, or your audience, better than the next guy, that's leverage, and that's just experience, right?
Is it true to say that intuition might be data in disguise? Like you're intuiting something because of past data points that maybe you can't even recall?
So
Maybe not
Intuition
all
is
the
probably
time.
not the right word, but I
Yeah.
think that there's guesses and
Yeah.
like guesstimates, which is can be dangerous, and that's I think where you come up with the
Hmm.
the folks who are losing 8 out of 10 times.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's making informed, kind of strategic choices
Yeah.
based on, your understanding and your experience of a market, of a product, of an audience.
Yeah, no, I like this. I mean, it almost seems like the way you positioned it, being data driven really falls apart as a worldview because data doesn't tell you what to do. And there's so much data, you have to choose how to edit it. And so by default, you're not data driven because you have to edit out some of the data you're looking at. And there's data points that get left out of a data driven mindset, like past experience and connecting dots, and things like that. So really, no one can be data driven even if they wanted to be because that doesn't mean what we think it means.
Well, so, data is great to be able to answer questions, right?
Hmm.
You first have to have the questions
Yeah,
and you have to have the ability to easily access the data.
yeah,
So, and that second piece is really a crutch for a lot of companies because they have a shit ton of data
yeah.
and no one knows how to compile it or what's accurate, what's not accurate, where,
Hmm.
what are the different models, like what are the, so this, that's kind of the first step is like, how do you actually make the data source actually accessible and not only accessible but easily accessible.
Yeah. No,
So that, we're in the day and age now where there's a ton of tools, right, that you can
hmm
to choose from, and so it's become easier. But you really have to have somebody to really own. If it's one of these front end libraries like a mix panel or amplitude or whatever, like somebody has to own like designing that schema and really
hmm
setting that up so that when you do have a question, you're actually tracking the thing and so you can answer the question. Or for a more mature growth team, like having a tool that easily allows us to query some data warehouse to go Redshift or something. But even then, like again, you have to have
what query are you
clean
putting into the
tables
system?
and
And yeah,
right.
no, it's a great
So
point. It makes me think about like the divide between real intelligence and artificial intelligence. There's a gap there that I don't think will ever be overcome because artificial
yeah,
intelligence is just complicated data sets, but there's no
yeah,
sentient human asking the right questions with actual, consciousness. And it
yeah.
may
I don't
look
know,
the
man.
same
We're
on
getting
the
closer every day. It's freaking me out.
yeah, but see, I think it's actually a philosophical divide, not a
Yeah,
can the technology get fast enough divide or get good
yeah,
enough. Because I think the divide is someone has to ask the right questions from the outside of the data system. But either
yeah.
way, whatever you think about AI, the point is like data can't do the job of a human, and so it's good to be informed and not 100% driven by it, whatever that means. No, it's awesome just to hear the way you think about data, and it's inspiring to hear about how many different ways you used it at Hired, because you used it in ways that I wouldn't have thought to even ask you about. It seemed like it infiltrated every part of the business that you got your hands on, and so it's just really cool to hear that.
Well, I think it's really comes down to data is just a tool in a toolbox, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you think about growth, that growth mindset is really just like, how do we make the biggest gains to the business in the shortest amount of time possible? How are we going to make the biggest impact? How are we going to, spend our time here at the office effectively?
Yeah.
And so, it all comes back to strategy. And so I think that's the difference of like, growth hacking versus having an actual like strategic growth mindset is you're
Mm-hmm.
really looking at, all the tools at your disposal and, what can we do to make, kind of looking at that, McClure's pirate,
Mm-hmm.
metrics, looking at each of those metrics and saying like, how can we move each of those metrics the most and do it in a, like, a repeatable, fashion that we can, basically repeatable, scalable,
Yeah.
strategic fashion. So
Yeah, I had a guest on. It was I'm blanking on his name, but he was the growth guy at Twitter, and now he's at a VC fund. You probably know who I'm talking about.
oh, Josh Ellman.
Josh Elman, yeah. And one
Yeah,
one of his quotes on my show was, "You can't hack the long-term patterns of growth," and I love
yeah,
that. He was talking about Twitter at the
yeah,
time, but it's like at some point you have growth hacks and you have growth strategy, and you can't hack together a strategy. That's really putting the pieces in place at a fundamental level to get
yeah,
growth that's scalable and repeatable. A hack gets you a bump, on the radar for some period of time, but it's not something you can build $100 million business on. There has to be something deeper there to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think it's a pyramid shape, right? And so you have that foundation is your growth strategy, your growth model. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Andy Johns, who also used to be at Greylock with Josh, but
Yeah.
he talks about, like, you have to have that model to start with, and that's your foundation for the business, right? That's how the business scales.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you build out your channels, your investments, and then at the top of the pyramid, that's when you get into the actual, like, the day-to-day optimizations or
Mm-hmm.
tactics or whatever. And so if you start to do this without that foundation, like, then you have this upside down pyramid that's just going to, like, fall over. So,
Topple.
yeah.
Absolutely. Now,
So
another thing too, real quick, tell me about this. At Hired, you built out teams around the different channels. Is that right?
yeah. So I mean, the growth team at Hired was structured, I think, pretty uniquely, where we had, like, a product team and we had a marketing team. The marketing team was really kind of traditional marketing. We had it was mostly a paid marketing organization.
Mm-hmm.
We had some other functions too, like, PR and some different functions there, but those kind of traditional marketing. And so I came on and really just so, like, 80% of our acquisition was paid, and it's actually a pretty expensive channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at, like, how do we diversify, our acquisition. So built out, like, content marketing team and SEO team. We built this in-house referral program that now makes up about 17% of participating candidates.
Yeah.
And so, really built out teams, and Hired's a very large team, and the marketing team was, I don't even know, like, in the 30s or 40s, at that time, including the growth team and the engineers who supported.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty large, chunk of the company.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just made sense, right? So, and it's kind of, this is the same model I followed at Creative Market. Like, at Creative Market, I was the first growth guy, and, I planted these seeds across these different channels. And as I'd see, one of these channels kind of blossom, then I'd go find an expert who, like, was, very, goes really deep in that particular channel. And I just trust that person to just, own this channel and run with it. And so,
Yeah.
That's how I built out the team at Creative Market. And it's the same way I built out the team at Hired.
So it's kind of like, Brian Balfour talks about the T shape. You have to know a lot about a lot of stuff in growth and then be really good at a couple, pieces of it. You're similar, but you're saying you know a lot about everything. And when something works, you find somebody to be the leg of the T. You find somebody that goes deep in that area.
Yeah, I like to, maybe this isn't true, but I like to say that, I'm a square shape marketer. So just really tried to, at different points in my career, I've gone deep in different things. I don't know, there's definitely people who know more about each of those channels than I do. But I think as especially as like a founding team member, like, it's less about, how well you know channels or tactics and that type of thing. It's more about what's your strategic mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And really thinking about, again, like, the company, the business, the thing you're selling to people. Is there a market big enough to build this sustainable business? And then if so, then how do you throw fuel on that fire?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, the difference.
Well, it's so interesting because, I've had over 180 guests now, and I talk about growth with all of them. And you could take all of them and put them in one of two camps based on what you just said. There's growth practitioners and there's growth strategists. I got some guys that come on, they know everything about paid marketing. They know every little tip and trick to optimize a Facebook campaign. And that's awesome. We need them.
Yeah.
But they're not growth strategists. They're not seeing the overall big picture, come into a company and shape how they think about growth, make sure the market can sustain these channels to be repeatable and scalable, and then find the people and put them in place to do it. And that right there is a difference in pay grade, right? That's a difference in how much value you bring to the organization. Practitioners are they're important, but they're less valuable than a strategist when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think it's exactly right. Like, I think that if I only spent time and, paid, like, I can go really deep in paid, but, for whatever business I'm working on, like, paid just might not be a channel that works. And so,
and then you're stuck. You don't have
having that
tools.
Yeah. Maybe it is just a higher level, like, strategic, like, lens of a company is yeah, I mean, I think that is, whether that's a generalist or what you want to call it, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It reminds me of like the role of like CEO. Like a CEO probably isn't awesome at anything, but they're really good at everything you throw at them. They can manage a lot of different things and figure it out. It's almost
yeah.
like the kind of role that you find yourself in is almost like a CEO of growth. You're seeing it very big picture. You're not stuck on a tactic at the end of the top of the pyramid like we talked about, you know?
I mean, that's really what my role is today. Like I'm GM of Dribbble, so I'm really just, thinking, high level of Dribble's business, which, is a top 1,000 website in the world and, has this, amazing community of designers. And, I'm coming in at this point in the life cycle of the business to really think like, how do we continue to scale this thing, and what are new lines of business, and how can we build, extend our vision
Hmm.
for the company to, better provide value for designers and kind of be that central hub for designers at any stage of their career. And so you kind of take what we have today, and
Hmm.
then, the strategic lens is now to take that, and then how do you use that as the foundation to build like what you want to,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
eventually get to.
let's wrap up by talking about Dribbble here. So
Yeah.
you've come in at Dribbble. What are you excited about there? Like, are there certain opportunities that you just know there's gold there, and you got to figure out how to make it work? Is there certain data points you're seeing that are getting you excited? Like, what is it that's like when you wake up? Is the thought that puts a smile on your face about what you're getting ready to do at Dribbble?
I mean, for me, it's like it's kind of it's kind of coming home. It's like this kind of perfect opportunity for me personally. I have a design degree. I started my career as a web designer.
Hmm.
I joined Creative Market, which is now a large marketplace for design assets and a design community in its own right. And just really loved my time at Creative Market, and then and also through my career. So my first job out of college,
Hmm.
that company was acquired by Monster. Then I co-founded a company called Branch Out, which was a professional network on Facebook. And then my time at Hired. So I have this like history of dabbling in the recruitment
Like design and
industry.
recruitment, and now it's all
So
coming
now
together.
Dribbble is kind of this marriage of we have this amazing engaged community of designers where they show and tell the work they're working on, and then we also have like a job board and some subscriptions that help companies who are building their design teams to find top talent. And so it's
Hmm.
kind of the marriage of those two things. And
Is
so
the role you were
I'm really
born
excited.
for?
I feel like there's so many cool things that we can do, and kind of where the whole like you know industry of work and just how people are working, and like remote
Hmm.
work is becoming more of a norm. Freelance is becoming more of a norm, and so I think that there's LinkedIn published a paper last December that just talked about the kind of the shift in how people are working, and people are definitely moving away from full-time gigs and towards these like you know freelance opportunities. And one of the top three industries who are working freelance, one is design. And
Yeah.
so I see it just a huge opportunity to build, continue to build a platform and tools and value for folks who want to work as independent designers.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Zach, this has been an incredible interview. I'm going to ask two final questions. I end every interview with these two questions. So the first
Yeah.
one is, what are you working on as soon as we close out of Skype? Whether it's super awesome or super boring, taking the dog for a walk, eating, or changing the world with a new strategy at Dribble.
Um, Honestly, I'm gonna end this meeting and put my to-do list together. There's so much going on.
So
I'm
you have to
like,
figure out what to do is what you're going to do.
there's so much to do. I think is where I'm at.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't have any specifics to reach out. I think that at Dribble we're really looking at some low hanging fruit, at just some optimizations we can make around revenue.
Yeah.
If we can make some kind of some nice bumps in revenue over the next few months, then that's money that we can invest in the team. The cool thing about Dribble is it's bootstrapped, it's profitable.
Yeah.
And so continuing that path is really important. So there's so much stuff that we want to build, and the team right now is pretty small. So the faster we can make more money, we can reinvest that in building out the team to
Yeah.
do more stuff.
That's awesome. And then
Yeah.
last question, what is the best advice you have for any startup that's trying to grow?
Um, Focus. Prioritization is a lot of folks, along the way, and I've had some stuff that's worked, is asked like, well, what's the silver bullet for my business? And, you know, I think the only silver bullet for growth is that, there's only so many hours in the day. And so prioritizing and finding what's going to make the biggest impact of the business and focusing on that, even if it's the harder thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Humans, as you build out your to-do list, you tend to check out the stuff that's, do the easy to do stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hard stuff you kind of leave for last, and sometimes you run out of time, don't get to it. So really having a process to be able to stack rank, the most impactful ideas for the business and really focus there.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on and doing another episode of Growth Hacker TV.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
Good seeing you.
Bye-bye.